The first thing Rokan saw was the faint outline of a woman lying motionless in the gray, morning ash, her dark hair fanned across the scorched earth like a fallen midnight sky. And for reasons he could not yet explain, his pulse hammered as if the spirit world itself had whispered her name into his bones. The fire had broken before sunrise, raging through the abandoned freight station at Raven Gorge, leaving nothing but smoke ghosts curling into the cold desert air. Rokan had come because he had seen the flames miles away and felt rather than thought that he needed to. Now, standing on the cracked stone platform, he realized this was no ordinary ruin. Something terrible had happened here, and someone had survived it. Her age, perhaps 30, rode quiet maturity on her features, even in unconscious stillness. She wore clothing torn by heat and dust, a faded doeskin dress, leggings, boots scorched at the heel. No ordinary traveler, no ranch hand, no drifter. Rokan knelt beside her, surprised by how steady his hands were as he checked her pulse. She lived, barely, but something else stirred the air, something wrong. A set of fresh boot prints circled the ruins, wide, deep, and hurried. The tracks told a story of violence, of someone being dragged, of desperate resistance. Rokan's jaw tightened. Whoever she was, she had not come here willingly. The desert around them was silent, save for the popping embers and the wind moving through the canyon. Raven Gorge always carried an eerie echo, but today the stillness felt carved from fear. He lifted her carefully, and only then did he notice the paint on her shoulder not applied by her hand. A crude mark, smeared in haste, one that made the back of his neck prickle. It was a symbol he had not seen in years, a twisting broken arrow. His father once said, "If you ever see the broken arrow mark, leave the dead where they lie." But she wasn't dead. Rokan wrapped her in his blanket and moved toward the narrow trail that climbed toward the upper desert ridge. The old freight station smoke billowed behind him like a morning veil. Whatever had happened here, someone did not want her found. The woman stirred when he reached the ridge. A weak breath, a soft sound, half pain, half memory. Rokan stopped, adjusting her weight in his arms. Her lashes fluttered, but she did not wake. Not yet. He continued through the desert, stepping over yucca shadows and scattered stones until he reached his hidden shelter, a hollow in a sandstone wall, barely noticeable unless you knew to look. He laid her inside and set to work grinding herbs, heating water, and readying bandages he had crafted from woven cotton strips as he tended to her wound scratches across her arms. A deep bruise on her ribs, dried blood near her hairline. He wondered who she was and why fate had brought her across his path. He had spent years avoiding entanglements, living between worlds, the Apache world of his birth and the white towns that spat dust and prejudice. His life had been a trail of solitude, chosen and unchosen. But this woman, something different clung to her. A story, a danger, and a gravity he'd felt from the moment he saw her. When he touched her wrist to apply a poultice, her fingers suddenly curled around his. Weak, trembling, but gripping, her eyelids trembled, then opened. Her eyes were the color of running water, calm, yet filled with something broken and terrifying. Fear, memory, fire. She gasped and tried to sit up, but pain struck her like lightning. Rokan held her gently. "You're safe," he said quietly, his voice deep and steady, though inside nothing felt steady at all. "You're in the high desert shelter. The fire is gone." She stared at him, at his long black hair braided with bone beads, at the scars crossing his forearms, at the quiet strength he carried like a second skin. Her breath hitched, as if trying to remember where safety ended and danger began. Who are you?" she whispered. "Rokan." She swallowed, gaze wavering, as if afraid to speak her own name. But finally, voice cracked by smoke and fear, she said, "My name is Seraphina Grayhawk." Beautiful name. Heavy name. She looked around, eyes reflecting the flickering firelight. They're coming, she whispered. The men who burned the station. They weren't trying to kill me. Not yet. They were trying to take me, Rokan stilled. Why? Seraphina closed her eyes, tears slipping past her lashes. Because, she said, voice trembling, I have something they want. Something hidden. Something they will kill you for. Just for saving me. Rokan felt the world narrow, the air sharpen. This wasn't rescue. This was the beginning of a war he never wanted. Rokan waited until Seraphine's breathing steadied before he spoke again. The fire in the cave cracked quietly, casting wild shadows across the sandstone walls. Outside, the desert wind moved like a whispering spirit, carrying the faint scent of sagebrush and distant rain. She sat with her back against the wall, arms wrapped around herself, as if the warmth of the fire still couldn't reach the cold that clung to her bones. Tell me, Rokan said. His voice was calm but edged with the seriousness of a man who'd lived long enough to recognize real danger. What happened at Raven Gorge? Seraphina swallowed, gaze fixed on the flames. It wasn't supposed to happen like that, she murmured. I was only meant to pass through. I had a horse, supplies, and a map. She hesitated as if the word itself carried weight. A map someone would kill for. Rokan's body tensed. The broken arrow symbol he had seen at the ruins now felt heavier in his mind. What map? He asked. Seraphina closed her eyes, inhaling shakily. A map drawn by my mother before she died. It shows a route through the Black Canyon. To something sacred. Something hidden long before any white man came to our lands. Rokan let the silence stretch. He knew the kind of secrets elders guarded, the kind that tribes whispered around fires but never wrote on hides or in journals. Why did they want you alive? He asked quietly. She looked at him, then truly looked, and her eyes shimmered with the fear she'd been trying to swallow. Because they need me to read it. A tremor crossed her lips. My mother encoded the directions. Only a Grayhawk can understand the symbols. Rokan felt the weight of her words. The Grayhawk line was older than most tribes still standing. Known for vision, memory, and wisdom. If someone wanted the map badly enough to burn a station and drag a woman through smoke. How many men? Rokan asked. Seraphina hesitated. 4, maybe 5. But they weren't alone. Her voice dropped to a whisper. There was someone with them, a man they called the Widowmaker. Rokan's expression darkened. He had heard that name before. A hunter, a ghost with a human face. A man whose history was written in blood. If he was involved, then this was no small raid or simple robbery. Seraphine's hands trembled. They killed everyone else at the station. I only escaped because I jumped from the backroom window before the fire reached it. I ran until they tackled me. I fought, but, her voice cracked. One of them hit me, hard. Everything after that is smoke. Rokan exhaled slowly, his thoughts moving like arrows. This wasn't chance. This wasn't fate. This was a storm coming straight toward them. You said they're coming, he said. How do you know? Seraphina turned her head toward the cave entrance as if expecting shadows to appear. They always track what they think they own. Rokan didn't like that word own. The way it made her voice tighten. The way it made anger rise in his chest like thunder. He stood and walked toward the cave mouth, scanning the desert ridge below. The sky had turned a deep blue streaked with purple. The air carried an unusual stillness, too still, too expectant. Rokan returned to her side and crouched. We move at first light, he said. They'll search the ruins. They'll see where I carried you. They'll follow the trail. Seraphina nodded, though worry clouded her features. Where will we go? There's a place, he said. A hidden valley. My father took me there once. The entrance is narrow enough that a single man can defend it. If we reach it before they find our tracks, we'll have time to plan." Seraphine's breathing calmed a little, though the fear did not leave her eyes entirely. "Why are you helping me, Rokan?" He looked into the flames, choosing his words. "Because when I found you," he murmured, "something inside me said the spirits put you in my path. And because no woman, Grayhawk or not, deserves to be hunted like an animal." Her eyes softened for a moment, gratitude flickering like a shy spark. But before she could speak, a sound pierced the silence. A distant echo. A horse's cry. Seraphine's breath hitched. "They're close." Rokan's hand slid to the knife strapped to his thigh. "No," he said, listening carefully. "Not close enough to see us, but close enough to smell the trail." He tossed dirt over the fire until only faint embers glowed. The cave sank into near darkness. Seraphina stiffened, but Rokan's calm presence steadied her. "We leave now," he said. In the dim glow, she watched him rise, muscles tense, movements deliberate, eyes sharp. They slipped out into the night, guided only by the moon and the fear of what followed. And behind them, hidden in the darkness, a second set of footsteps began to stalk the trail they'd left. The desert night swallowed them whole as Rokan and Seraphina moved across the ridge, keeping low beneath the jagged rocks. The moon thin as a blade hung above them, offering just enough light to see but not enough to reveal them to anyone who might be watching. Rokan led the way, barefoot and silent, stepping where the shadows were deepest. Seraphina followed closely, her breath steady but sharp. She was still weak, but fear had carved strength into her steps. They traveled in silence until the cave was a distant memory. Only then did Rokan slow and turn slightly. "Your strength is returning," he murmured. Seraphina nodded. "Fear makes the body listen." Rokan understood. In the desert, fear was a language. It could save you or betray you. They came to a narrow trail sloping downward into a cluster of towering boulders. Rokan motioned for her to stop and scan the horizon again, his posture rigid. Something was wrong, not something he could see, but something he felt. "Rokan?" Seraphina whispered. He raised a hand, and then he heard it. A faint metallic click. The unmistakable sound of a rifle hammer being drawn back. Rokan shoved Seraphina behind a rock just as a gunshot ripped through the night. The bullet struck the earth where Seraphina had been standing a heartbeat earlier, showering them with grit. A second shot followed, then silence. "Down the slope," Rokan hissed. Seraphina didn't hesitate. They raced downhill, darting between boulders as two more gunshots cracked behind them. The shooters weren't trying to kill them. If they wanted her dead, they would have fired differently. They were hurting them. Rokan grabbed Seraphine's arm and pulled her into a narrow fissure between two stone pillars. The space was barely wide enough for them to stand side by side. They pressed against the rock, breathing quietly. Bootsteps crunched above them. Two men. Their voices drifted down, low and mocking. That was her. Widowmaker said she'd follow someone. Didn't expect the Apache to be with her. Widowmaker wants her alive, the second man muttered. And he wants the map even more. But he said if the Apache becomes a problem. Their voices faded as they moved further along the ridge. Rokan waited until he could no longer hear their boots before speaking. "They're tracking fast. Too fast." Seraphine's voice trembled, though she fought to hide it. "He's with them, then? The Widowmaker?" Rokan nodded. Seraphina leaned against the rock, closing her eyes. "He won't stop until he finds the map." "And me." Rokan studied her for a moment, his expression unreadable. "This map? Where is it?" Seraphina hesitated only for a breath before she touched her side. "Sewn inside the lining of my dress." Rokan's eyes widened slightly. You kept it on you? Where else would I hide the last thing my mother gave me? She whispered. If it leaves my sight, it leaves my protection. Rokan could hear the pain in her voice. This wasn't simply an object. It was blood and memory. A mother's last secret handed to a daughter. But it also meant danger clung to her like a second shadow. He took her hand. We'll reach the hidden valley. From there, we can decide what to do next. Seraphina looked at him as though searching for something: truth, maybe, or trust. Whatever she saw in Rokan's eyes, it steadied her. They moved again, slower but determined. The desert changed around them as they traveled. The land dipped into a small ravine lined with mesquite and scattered brush. A faint trickle of water whispered from somewhere ahead. As they reached the ravine's center, Seraphina suddenly stopped. Do you hear that? She whispered. Rokan listened. Not water. Not wind. A soft rhythmic drumming. Hoofbeats. Coming fast. Hide, Rokan ordered. But before they could move, a shadow broke over the ridge above, tall, broad, and mounted. The rider wore a long coat and a dark hat pulled low. Even from a distance, Rokan could feel the chill that seeped from the man's presence. Seraphine's breath strangled in her throat. Widowmaker, she whispered. The rider stopped, his silhouette etched against the starlit sky. He seemed to sense them, even though they were hidden deep in the ravine. And then he spoke, his voice drifting like a cold wind through the canyon. Seraphina, he called softly. You can run with the Apache all night. He leaned forward slightly in his saddle. But you know you belong to me. Rokan's blood surged like wildfire. This night trail had just become a battlefield. Rokan moved first. He seized Seraphine's wrist and pulled her deeper into the ravine shadows as Widowmaker's silhouette loomed above them. Rokan's breaths were controlled, measured, but Seraphina could feel the tension vibrating beneath his skin like a bowstring drawn to breaking. Widowmaker remained perfectly still astride his horse, head angled slightly as if he could smell fear drifting on the wind. Seraphina, the man repeated, his voice smooth as polished bone. You know, I don't like chasing. Come out, and maybe the Apache lives. Seraphina flinched at his tone, but Rokan leaned close, his whisper steady. Do not move. Do not answer. Widowmaker's laugh rumbled faintly. You think the boy can protect you? He can't even protect himself. Rokan's jaw hardened. He wasn't a boy. And Widowmaker had no idea how much blood Rokan had spilled to survive the half-life he'd been given. The horse shifted. Widowmaker adjusted the reins. Search the ravine, he barked. 4 figures emerged from behind him, armed men with rifles and lanterns. The light swung across the rocks like searching eyes. Rokan scanned the ravine's edge, calculating distance, numbers, escape routes. None were promising. He pulled Seraphina closer. When I move, you run. Her fingers tightened around his. I won't leave you. There's no choice. She shook her head fiercely. I won't survive alone. You know that. Rokan exhaled slow, heavy. He wished she didn't speak truth because it made the choices ahead unbearably sharp. The lanterns drew closer, beams slicing toward their hiding place. Widowmaker's men spread across the ravine in a long, sweeping line. We're running out of time, Seraphina whispered. Rokan nodded once. Then he acted. With a burst of speed, he grabbed Seraphine's waist and swung her up onto the rocky ledge above them. She stifled a cry as she scrambled to steady herself. Below, Rokan pressed into the shadows and waited for the nearest lantern to pass. The moment the light swung away, Rokan sprang like a mountain cat. He launched onto the nearest man, knocking him flat. The lantern flew from the man's hand and shattered on the rocks. Darkness swallowed them again. Rokan moved fast 2 swift blows, and the man stopped struggling. Over here! Another shouted. Rokan ducked behind a boulder as shots cracked through the night, bullets slamming into stone. Sparks flew. Dust choked the air. Seraphina crouched above, heart pounding as she watched Rokan's silhouette move like a ghost between shadows. She whispered to herself, "Spirits, protect him." Widowmaker remained above, unmoving, watching everything as though this chase were merely a tedious formality. His calm was more terrifying than the gunfire. Below, Rokan seized a fallen rifle from the unconscious man. He checked the chamber. 3 bullets. He aimed toward the nearest lantern-bearing outlaw. 1 shot, the lantern burst in a spray of glass and oil. Darkness reclaimed the ravine again. Seraphina saw her moment and dropped back down to Rokan, landing beside him softly. He frowned. "I told you to run, and I told you no." Before he could argue, another shot rang out, this one precise, controlled. The bullet hit inches from Rokan's head, embedding deep into stone. Widowmaker had fired. "I warned you, Apache," Widowmaker called, voice echoing cold and hollow. "She's mine. And now you are a problem." Rokan grabbed Seraphine's hand. "Go!" They sprinted deeper into the ravine, boots kicking up dirt. Widowmaker's horse thundered down the slope behind them, hooves striking sparks from stone. "He's coming!" Seraphina gasped. Rokan glanced back. Widowmaker rode with unnatural precision, navigating the dark ravine as though he'd memorized every rock and shadow. A flicker of fear crossed Rokan's features. Ahead, the ravine split in 2 directions. This way. Rokan pulled her left. But just before they reached the fork, Widowmaker fired again. The bullet struck a boulder above them. The rock groaned, split, and collapsed. A rush of dust and stone crashed downward. Rokan shoved Seraphina aside as the world fell around them. Seraphina coughed, scrambling up from the dust cloud. "Rokan!" She turned and saw him pinned beneath a fallen slab, buried from the waist down. Rokan gritted his teeth, fighting pain. "Go," he rasped. "You can still." "No." She dropped beside him, desperately pushing at the slab. It didn't budge. Widowmaker reined his horse to a stop only 20 yards away, his silhouette framed by moonlight. He dismounted slowly, like a man taking his time before a kill. Seraphina looked at Rokan, tears streaking the dust on her cheeks. "I won't leave you." Rokan grabbed her hand, his voice raw. "You must." But she didn't move. And Widowmaker kept walking, each step echoing death across the ravine. The first streaks of dawn glimmered over the horizon, painting the desert in bruised purples and gold. Rokan groaned as he strained against the boulder that pinned him, muscles quivering under the weight. Every inch of him burned from the effort, but he refused to give in. 1 arm free, he managed to hook Seraphine's hand again. "Pull," he rasped. Her palms pressed against his, shoving with all the strength her trembling body could summon. Dust and sweat caked her forehead, but determination shone in her stormy eyes. Slowly, agonizingly, the stone shifted, groaning against gravity. Rokan surged free with a grunt, rolling onto the jagged earth. Seraphina staggered back, collapsing beside him. They were covered in cuts and dust, hearts racing, lungs on fire, but the fire in their eyes burned hotter than the pain. "Are you hurt?" she gasped, brushing rock dust from his shoulder. "Nothing that won't heal," he said grimly, glancing toward the ridge. "But he's still out there." His hand rested instinctively on the knife strapped to his thigh. Widowmaker would be patient. He always was. Seraphina nodded. "Then we have to move. We have to reach your valley." Rokan helped her to her feet. The desert seemed endless, but he led her toward a hidden ravine that twisted behind boulders. And mesquite trail only he knew, passed down by his father long ago. As they ran, each sound made their pulse spike. the snap of a twig, a distant bird, the whisper of wind across sand. Every movement could betray them. Hours passed, the sun climbing higher, scorching their backs. Still, they pressed on. Rokan's long strides carried Seraphina along rough terrain, his muscles flexing like coiled steel. At times he slowed, allowing her to catch her breath, but never for long. Time was not their ally. Finally, as the sun reached its peak, the terrain changed. The jagged cliffs opened into a hidden valley, a lush sanctuary that seemed impossible in the middle of the harsh desert. A small creek meandered through the green, and wildflowers clung to rocks like jewels. Ancient trees provided shade, and the sound of running water was a balm to their battered spirits. Rokan stopped at the valley's edge, chest heaving. "Here," he said, voice low and reverent. "No one finds this place unless they know the trail." Seraphina looked around in awe. The hidden valley seemed untouched by time, a place where danger could not follow. Her hand brushed the flowing creek, cool and clear, and she let out a long, shaky breath. Rokan watched her, heart catching in a way he didn't expect. For years he had lived between two worlds neither fully Apache nor fully accepted by the settlers' towns. He had walked deserts, fought for survival, carried burdens too heavy for most men. And yet, here she was, a woman who had survived fire, betrayal, and the deadly pursuit of the Widowmaker, and she made the valley feel like hope itself. "We can rest," he said finally, lowering himself against a tree. "But not for long. He'll be searching. Widowmaker always tracks." Seraphina settled beside him, exhaustion pulling at her bones. She turned to look at him. "Rokan, why do you help me? You could leave. You could survive alone." Rokan's jaw tightened. "Because when I found you, it wasn't chance. And because no one deserves to be hunted like prey, especially not you." Her lips trembled, but she managed a faint smile. For a moment, the weight of the past night lifted, and they shared silence, broken only by the creek and the distant wind. Then she reached into the lining of her dress, pulling out a small rolled parchment, the map her mother had left her. "This is it," she whispered, "the map through Black Canyon. Everything starts here." Rokan took it, unrolling the fragile paper, studying the symbols and winding paths. His brows furrowed. This isn't just a trail. It's a guide to something sacred, something people would kill for. Seraphine's eyes darkened with worry. They already tried. They would. And now they know we survived. Rokan rolled up the map and tucked it safely in his belt. "Then we prepare. We hide. We wait. And when the time comes, we'll finish this." A strange bond had formed between them, woven through fear, survival, and shared desperation. And beneath that bond, unspoken yet undeniable, a spark had ignited in Rokan's chest. Something older than fear, something he had not felt in years. For now, the valley offered sanctuary, but the desert beyond whispered that their fight was far from over. The hidden valley offered a moment of peace, but Rokan knew better than to believe in safety. The desert could forgive no mistakes, and the Widowmaker was relentless. He stood at the creek's edge, muscles coiled like springs, watching the horizon while Seraphina knelt nearby, cleaning the scratches and bruises that lined his forearms and shoulders. "You've carried me farther than I thought possible," she murmured. "I've never met anyone who moves like you." Rokan allowed a small smirk, though his eyes never left the distant ridges. "Desert teaches you how to move when every shadow could be your last." Seraphina glanced at him, noticing the strain beneath his calm exterior. "You've lived a life like that, haven't you?" Rokan nodded, rubbing the bridge of his nose. "I've survived worse than Widowmaker and his men. But I've never had to protect someone like you." Her gaze softened, and for the briefest moment, she allowed herself to relax. The creek's cool water lapped at their boots, and birds began to stir in the morning light. For a fleeting heartbeat, the world felt unbroken, but the stillness was deceptive. Rokan's ears twitched, catching a sound Seraphina could not hear, a faint rustle beyond the tree line. His hand slid to his knife, fingers tightening. The wind had shifted slightly, just enough to carry an unfamiliar scent. "They're here," he whispered. Seraphine's head snapped up, eyes wide. "Already?" "Yes," Rokan said. "And we need to move before they see the valley." He grabbed the map from her hands and rolled it tightly, tucking it securely into his belt. "Follow me." They slipped through a narrow passage along the creek, where rocks jutted overhead and thick brush offered concealment. Rokan's bare feet made no sound as he moved like a shadow, leading Seraphina to a hidden grove deeper in the valley. "Why does he want the map so badly?" Seraphina asked between ragged breaths. "It's just a trail." Rokan paused, crouching behind a rock. "It's not just a trail. Your mother's map leads to a place sacred to your people. A place that has been hidden for centuries. Whoever controls it can control a secret no one else knows. That's why they would burn stations and kill anyone who gets in their way." Seraphine's lips parted in shock. "All this for something hidden in the canyon?" "Yes," Rokan said firmly. "And Widowmaker will stop at nothing to get it. That's why we survived tonight. We move carefully. One misstep, and it's over." The wind shifted again, carrying the metallic smell of horse and leather. Rokan pressed his back against a boulder and peered through the foliage. Two men appeared on the ridge above, scanning the valley with lanterns. They had split from the main group, searching for tracks. "Stay low," Rokan whispered. "They're scouts. If they see us, they'll call for more." Seraphina sank into the shadows, gripping his forearm. Rokan's dark eyes met hers, and in that moment, a silent understanding passed between them. They were in this together, bound by necessity, trust, and something neither dared name. Rokan moved first, a fluid shadow weaving through the brush. Seraphina followed, clinging to his movements, each step measured. The scouts paused near the creek, their lanterns swaying as they whispered in low voices. Rokan froze, calculating. Then, without warning, a large branch snapped under his foot. Both he and Seraphina froze in place, hearts hammering. The scouts' heads turned sharply. Rokan caught the glint of rifles moving toward them. He acted. A burst of movement, swift and precise, brought him into position behind a boulder. One scout saw only a flicker of shadow before Rokan's knife struck, and a muffled grunt silenced him. The other spun, firing a shot that dug into the rock beside him. "Run!" Rokan hissed, grabbing Seraphine's hand. They darted through the grove, Rokan shielding her with his broad frame. Bullets struck trees and stone, but he moved like the wind, carrying her through the maze of foliage and rocks. Finally, they emerged at a small cliff overlooking the valley below. The hidden sanctuary stretched out beneath them, safe for now. Seraphina collapsed to her knees, breathing hard. Rokan's chest rose and fell as he stood beside her, scanning the ridge for any sign of pursuit. "They'll regroup," he said quietly. "Widowmaker won't stop until he has the map." Seraphina looked up at him, eyes filled with a mix of awe and fear. "And we'll be ready?" Rokan's lips curved slightly, a rare smile. "We'll survive, together." The words hung in the air, heavy with promise. And for the first time since the fire at Raven Gorge, the hidden valley seemed more than just a refuge. It was a place where courage, trust, and perhaps something more could take root amidst the shadows of the Old West. But even as dawn painted the valley in light, Rokan knew the real danger. The Widowmaker was still out there, waiting, patient as death itself. Rokan crouched at the cliff's edge, the hidden valley sprawling below like a secret world untouched by man. He could feel the tension in Seraphine's hand as she gripped his forearm, her nails digging into his skin. The map, tucked safely in his belt, felt heavier than ever. It wasn't just paper, it was a lifeline, a promise, and a target. "They're coming," Rokan murmured, scanning the distant ridge where dust swirled like ghostly signals. The Widowmaker's men were regrouping, moving with methodical precision. The sun hung low, casting long shadows that twisted the desert into a realm of threats. Seraphine's lips pressed together, her gaze fixed on the horizon. I can't run anymore. I'm too tired." Rokan turned to her, muscles taut as coiled steel. "You won't have to run. Not today. Today, we end this." She blinked, startled by his certainty. "End it? How?" "By taking the fight to them," he said, voice low and unwavering. "They want the map. They'll come. We'll be ready." They slipped down the cliff into a narrow gorge that led deeper into the valley, a natural funnel that could be defended. Rokan set small traps along the path, hidden tripwires with stones ready to swing, sharp stakes concealed beneath brush. Every movement was calculated, every breath measured. By mid-afternoon, the air vibrated with the sound of hoofbeats. The Widowmaker appeared first, dark coat flapping in the wind, eyes cold and unblinking. Behind him, the riders spread across the ridge like a storm about to break. Rokan positioned Seraphina behind a boulder, shielding her from sight. His chest rose and fell, sinew rippling with controlled anticipation. For years he had prepared for moments like this, a man alone against the greed and cruelty of the world. But this time he was not alone. The first scout appeared at the gorge's mouth. A rope snapped. Rocks fell. A shout echoed. Rokan's knife flashed, then a second, then a third. One by one, the men fell into confusion, the precise ambush catching them off guard. Seraphina watched, heart hammering, as Rokan moved like a shadow brought to life. Each strike precise, each dodge instinctive. Blood mingled with dust, sunlight glinting on weapons, but Rokan's eyes never left the ridge, never left her. Then, at the heart of the chaos, Widowmaker dismounted. His rifle trained on Rokan, and for a moment, the world stilled. Sunlight glared off the barrel, catching the cold glint of the man's intent. Rokan. Widowmaker called, voice cutting through the valley like steel. "Give me the map. Let her go, and I might spare you." Rokan's jaw tightened. He stepped forward, bare chest gleaming with sweat and dust, muscles taut as ropes. "You'll get nothing," he growled. "Not her. Not the map. Not today." Widowmaker sneered, lifting his rifle. But Rokan was faster, a coiled strike forward. The first clash was brutal, metal and muscle colliding, dust and blood flying, the sound echoing across the canyon walls. Rokan twisted, dodged, parried, and struck. Each movement a testament to years of survival and the fierce will to protect. Seraphina, clutching a fallen branch, watched him fight with awe and terror. She realized then that this man, this Apache warrior, had carried her through fire, through shadow, and now through death itself. And in that realization, her fear turned into something fiercer, hope, finally. With a swift, decisive move, Rokan disarmed Widowmaker, sending the rifle clattering across the rocks. The outlaw staggered, chest heaving, eyes wide with disbelief. Rokan pressed the edge of his knife to his throat. "It's over," he said. "Leave, never return." Widowmaker glared, then slumped back, retreating with his remaining men. Dust rose behind them as they disappeared over the ridge, leaving the valley in silence once again. Rokan exhaled, chest heaving, blood mixing with sweat. He sank to the ground beside Seraphina. "It's done," he said quietly. Seraphine's eyes glimmered with tears. She reached for him, brushing dust from his face, fingers lingering against the sweat-drenched skin of his chest and arms. "You saved me," she whispered, voice trembling. "You saved me in this place." Rokan looked down at her, the weight of the battle, the fear, and the relief pressing into his chest. And then, in the soft light of the setting sun, he realized something he hadn't admitted even to himself. He had lost more than a fight. He had lost his heart. The moment Seraphina opened her eyes, even amidst smoke and danger, even amidst death and desert, she had claimed it. Seraphina reached up, tracing a line along his jaw. "We survived," she said softly. "And now maybe we can live." Rokan's lips curved, rare and genuine. "Yes," he murmured. "We live, together." The hidden valley, once a refuge, now felt alive with promise. Birds called from the trees, the creek whispered its eternal song, and the desert beyond remained vast and wild. But for the first time, Rokan didn't feel the pull of solitude because in the heart of the Old West, beneath dust and danger, beneath fire and shadow, he had found something worth fighting for. And as the sun dipped behind the canyon walls, painting the sky with molten orange and purple, Rokan and Seraphina stood together, survivors of the desert, warriors of their own story, and at last, unafraid of what the future held.